Let's talk about the business of the day as it relates to theater with your hosts, Darnell Radford and Mitch Weiss. This is The Business of Theater, a working title. Mitch, I know we're trying to figure this out, but we can't name the podcast The Business of Theater, Only Artists in the Building.
Of course we can, but it would be a really bad
it would be
idea.
fun.
It would be a really bad idea. That's
yes.
Okay. All right. So just keep working
it's
at
kind
it.
of
Maybe that's the subtitle. Just keep working at it.
I had a ton of rejected titles. The other one was a Mamet play.
We'd have to curse through the whole thing.
Yeah, pretty much. But welcome to the Business of Theater, a working title. I am Darnell Radford.
I'm Mitch Weiss.
And let's get down to business. Mitch, you sent me an interesting article to read, and this is a very similar. This is a topic that we always talk about, and it is always money. I mean, most of the updates to the business of Broadway have to do with money and the way money changes in our industry. But this one was particularly talking about this sort of mid-level artist that, arguably doesn't exist anymore.
It's along with the middle class of America. It has almost disintegrated into nothing. And while it was difficult
it's like
before,
we have...
it's even harder now. There have always been stars, right? We understand that. There are always people making tons of money. But along the way, there were what was called the working actor, the working stagehand, the working musician. And that seems to be a non-existent category if you don't count the waiters at local restaurants or somebody who is working at their uncle's, car garage, as a mechanic on the side. We all had to take second jobs. But I will say that 100% of certainly the actors and musicians that I know who have survived a career say the one thing that they never got was any advice on how they were going to survive their career. And that they got out of college, or if they didn't go to college, there was nobody there to teach them. There was nobody there to say, hey, here are some things you're going to bump into along the road, and you better be thinking about this now.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we do that?
I've had conversations with many artists, and especially over the past few years, there have been, let me step back just a little bit. There are many times you get so involved. There are career paths that you can get so involved in that it's really hard to see the rest of the world because of the lens that this particular career kind of puts you in. And then if you step out of it, it feels like you're on a totally different planet, and I think that our industry is kind of like that, or at least it feels like that. If you were somebody who, let's say you were in the drama club in high school, you entered into the theater program in college, all of your jobs have been kind of in the same vein. It's really hard to see other opportunities. Like, I know you know, artists who cannot see themselves working, food service, for example. Like, not talking about wait staff. I'm saying like, what if you love to cook, right? But
Right.
you're an actor. You may not think that running a restaurant is something that you are capable of doing, or something that you would even want to do because of the focus on time. You might feel like you missed your off ramp to pursue that kind of career path. But you also get so involved in your career that if you take any sort of exit off, any sort of detour, or just even temporary, you feel like you're gone forever.
But if you're not willing to think about it, to conceive of how your career is a mixture of
Hmm.
both creative arts and something else, which can still be creative, but
Yeah.
something else that will pay the rent, then what you're saying is, and this is what seems to be happening, what you're saying is, unless you come from a substantially well off family or marry into some money, you are not going to be able to withstand the pressures of a career that may not take off until you're in your 40s or 50s. And that is the fear and the shame of where our industry, especially after a pandemic, has fallen. That, and I used to
Yes.
joke all the time, is I used to tell people when they first get out of school, marry for money first. You can always get divorced, then you have money coming in, and then you marry for love second. That was a joke until now. It's the problem is we don't only want wealthy, upper middle class, and richer people in the arts. That can't happen. Yeah, rap, music has allowed a new path, but people are being taken advantage of, and they have one hit wonders if they're lucky enough to have it. And the money doesn't stay with them, and they haven't learned how to handle their finances. And then the people, the management that gave them their chance and the record labels steal all the money anyway. And unless you understand this, and they're not teaching it in college and they're not teaching it in high school, and parents aren't teaching it because they don't understand our industry, we're stuck. We have to, you, me, we're talking here, we have to be the educators. We have to be the ones to say, you must think about more than your creative art in order to build a creative career. And yes, you
Yeah.
want to focus on your creative career, there's no question. But I know people who I think are brilliant who have left the industry. They had to leave because they couldn't afford to stay in it. And that means our culture has lost out. We shouldn't have
Mm.
lost them. There's got to be another
I
way to at least pay your rent.
I've I've said over the years that I would talk to my grandma, who has recently passed, about career goals, and the conversation was always get something to fall back on. You
Yeah,
know,
right.
when I talked about my creative pursuits, and so I stumbled into technology, into IT, and I would always make these jokes that my grandma would tell everybody that I'm in computers. My grandson's in computers. Like, I'm physically in a computer. That's what I get paid to do. But there were many times, in explanations, in job interviews over time, I would say I'm sort of on this parallel path of arts and culture and information technology, because I was able to see how the values of information technology could support the efforts of arts and culture.
Hmm.
And you know, I it took me a moment to kind of take a step back and say, I guess I just want to be well rounded in arts and culture. But I every time I learn something new in technology, I was always thinking about, now how could the industry benefit from this? Like it may be presented as it's not directly for the arts community, but I would always think about how I could use this in this space, and you know, and kind of bring that in from a perspective that may not have been clear.
And what you're suggesting is, in my opinion, unbelievably valuable. It's not necessarily financially lucrative, because the
Hmm.
process of how do we use what we're bringing to the creative arts, how do we use that in a way that will pay our rent, isn't the same as how do we use that in a way that supports and improves, if that's the right word, the culture. So the
Yeah.
combination of the two is where we get confused and lost. Certainly, someone my age, we did not have technology to even talk about. I mean, yes, synthesizers were first coming around in music, uh, video cameras were improving, but it wasn't something you took home with you. Um,
Hmm.
and nowadays, I mean, there are people who are older who have limited interest in the technology, but they're still just as creative. So for them, the answers are different than for you, right? And we each bring something
Yeah.
different with us. They're both valuable, and there's so many people wanting to do it. How do we, in a society that does not seem to value artists financially, we're all on our own, right? How do we help each other to survive? Um, it's a
Yeah.
bit of a digression, but the Actors Fund, now called Entertainment Community Fund, they just changed their name this year, um, in New
Hmm.
York City, is one of those community things that says, we're not going to let you fall through the holes. We may not be able to pay your rent monthly, but if you have trouble eating, or if you can't find a doctor that you can afford, or you can't get health care or housing, we're here to help you and we'll pay for it. That's an unbelievably valuable thing that our industry does, that we all contribute to. So that's one thing, but there aren't too many others. I mean, we're better off than, certainly, if you're working at the Amazon warehouse, I guess, although they make better money
Yeah.
on the long term. So it's a really
So
hard balance.
where do you think this conversation needs to be had? Because I
Mm,
think about, um, you know, if you're in a degree program and you're focused on theater, uh, you're definitely going to prioritize the theater courses over like the business classes,
right.
you know, over the, you know, the other things in there. But I feel like there should be, at least, you know, at the college level, there should be some mandatory class that you take that is like, I don't know, like you Inc. or something
Absolutely.
about like this thing. Okay, so you're an actor, but that's not all you are. You know, there's so many other things you can do. There's so many other things that make you valuable, not just your training here as an actor, and really create a space that allows people to think about the other things that they excel in, and kind of, to an extent, sort of nerd out about. There
Right.
are a lot
Right.
of there are a lot of things that we do that do not require us to be on a stage, and we might think about them uh, differently when we realize that they are part of our support system, and not something to be, uh, you know, uh, passed aside or put on the back burner in pursuit of your overall theater career.
In support of what you've just said, first of all, it's one of the failures of the of higher education when it comes to the arts. And by the way, um, just 20 years ago, there was no such thing as an arts management course being offered at any
Mm-hmm.
higher education institution. This is a way for them to make money off of us. The
Mm.
same thing, you can learn acting skills with a private teacher, or sometimes just by working and finding somebody to mentor you. College has value to itself. There's no question. It gets your mind thinking. So while you're there, you should set up your own requirements that are going to make you a sustainable entity in life, that's going to make you feel comfortable. Not everyone has to learn, everyone needs to learn how to balance their own checkbook. That, of course, is not
Mm-hmm.
taught in most schools. But beyond that, the business of theater or of music, which is even worse than theater, by the way, as far as trying to make a living, um, you have to do, I think it's 3 million streams to even be noticed by Spotify.
Yeah.
And, I don't care how good your music is. If nobody knows you're there, they're not going to find you. So that becomes marketing. How do you learn marketing? How do you learn? Most of us are terrible at marketing ourselves. We don't have the egos to say, hey, I'm the most important person in the world, and you ought to see me. We're all just trying to be creative. That's a big part of the problem. So, what do we do about all of this? Uh, I'm going to refer to a wonderful, if not one of the best, Broadway musicals called Passing Strange. And you can find it on digitally. Spike Lee came in at its final performance and made a movie out of it, of the stage play. Passing Strange has a wonderful moment about, it's about a musician who loses his way along the way, and that's all he wants to be is a musician, but he misses his mother's funeral. All sorts of things happen in life. He goes through the drug thing. He ends up in Europe, coming from a Southern Baptist background,
Mm-hmm.
and he's a guitarist. And all of a sudden, about three-quarters of the way through, he stops and goes, to think that I made a decision about my entire life plan at the age of 18.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem. We don't have enough experience to make that decision. So, how do
Yes.
we prepare for what we should wait and see where it goes? There are people who want to be actors who end up in wardrobe on Broadway or in films. That's creative. You can end up anywhere. I get passionate about this because there isn't enough room for all of us to do exactly what we want, but we can be
Mm-hmm.
creative.
Yeah.
So, and schools don't help you with that. And I'm not going to say anything bad about any professors. They're wonderful. They're trying, they're teaching you as much as they can. But this is about self uh, motivation, about finding a path. And it's very hard to do while you're in college. You're first learning who you want to have sex with. How are you going to learn what your career is going to be like? You
That's
know,
true.
really,
Yeah.
right? Um,
Yeah, and it does feel like it is that is a heavy decision to make. You're celebrating graduating high school. You're so happy that last 12 years of your life, you couldn't wait to finish this and be done. And now you have to turn around and decide, um, you know, how to commit to another school for at least 4 years and what you want to do. And I would feel like at 18, I would be thinking of the funnest thing I can
that's
do,
right. That's right.
which ends up being something creative because it is fun. But then you think about, like, I can just think about in college when you had all of the electives that they were not requirements; they were extra, And there's a lot of great things in there, but if you don't find the right balance, and there isn't really an example of, okay, so you're pursuing a theater degree. Here are some electives that would be complementary to your theater degree, that you may not think of.
It's
You know,
it's really true.
if
Yeah, go ahead.
and no one asks the question. No one asks the question while they're in the program. So, which which arts organization do you want to be a slave to for the rest of your life? Because that isn't a question that we would ask, you know. But we're also not asking the question of what are the have you given any thought to the many things you can do with your talent besides chase the next opportunity to play on stage?
And what makes you think that the world needs you in
Yeah.
entertainment? The truth is, you can be some of the most amazing actors had no training at all, and some of them had a lot of training. It sometimes you bring it with you, and you're a natural. The other thing, which I speak to college grads and MFA grads all the time, is going, well, I saw the scene, the showcase you just did, and I can see you're talented, but it didn't tell me, can you sing? And they're looking at, well, I'm not particularly interested in musicals. What does that have to do with anything? Can you sing? Can you tap dance? I don't care that you're the best, but plays may require you to have other talents and skills.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be able to say to the director, yes, whatever you need me to do,
Mm-hmm.
I can do. I'm sure Tom Cruise did not start his career thinking, I can hold on to an airplane while it's in mid sky, um, and without a parachute. That doesn't come up, right? You need to
I
find.
do, I do, however, think his resume said under additional skills, I do my own stunts.
I don't think at the beginning it said that. I don't know. It's funny.
I mean, what was it? Risky Business,
Yeah.
the iconic scene where he's dancing in his underwear.
Hmm.
That was a stunt.
Oh yeah, no question, no question. But he had
They're
already,
like, "You sure you don't want a stunt,
but
Tybo? What if
he
you
had
get
already gotten
a
the
splinter?"
leading role though. At that point, it's when you don't have that yet,
Yes.
right? Where where does that work? Do you have to have the kind of money in the bank, meaning from your family or wherever you got it, in order to say, I am spending my entire day, all the time, doing nothing but preparing to be an actor or a set designer or a director or whatever it is you think you're going to do? Knowing that, by the way, by the age of 40, you may say, you know what, I've had enough of that. I'm going to transition to something else. Well, what are you going to do? Go back to school? No, you keep learning. That's a great thing about dancers. They take classes no matter how much work they have. They could be the prima donna of Alvin Ailey, and they are still in class, right? You never stop learning. So to leave college, if you even go to college, and think you don't need to, you go to the gym. So when you go to the gym, what are you doing that says, hey, if someone asks me to do a cartwheel on stage, I'm going to be able to do it because I'm strong enough?
Hmm.
You have to think of everything you possibly can do. There are people who just write, I ride a bicycle under skills. That's important.
Yeah.
It may not come up very often, but it's nice to know, right? And I do want to
Yeah.
know that whether you're a baritone or a soprano or an alto, what's your voice quality like? Do you have a tape somewhere showing me the quality of your voice, right?
Well, this always makes me think of gatekeepers.
Mm,
There are people that many artists have come across in their career that made them think that they are so far behind that they would never catch up,
Hmm.
or that they miss some opportunity they should already have right now. And that's not helpful either.
No, no. And what's worse is when
You know, and I
family doesn't support you. That is the worst. To hear people who said, and by the way, one of the worst things I've ever heard is somebody who is athletic and says, you know what, I want to take dance class. I feel that I can use my body to express myself. And a parent who says,
mhm.
you don't want to wear tights now, do you? How disgusting. How dare you not say, hey, I may not really understand what you want, but I'll support you. It's a creative art. Let's find a way. And then, as you said, the wonderful parental line, which is, but have a backup plan. That's okay.
Have a backup plan.
Right. Always have a backup plan, whatever that
But
means.
but you know what? I really value the fact that my grandmother did encourage me to have um a it wasn't well, she said to fall back on,
Yeah.
but what it translated into as I grew older was that I needed to diversify my skills, my talent. I needed to be open to learning new things and not saying like this is my exact direct path, and if I stray from it, I am nothing. You know, so I found an interest in these things, and then I wouldn't let it go as I was continuing to pursue other,
Right.
you know, efforts. But even when I thought about the podcasts,
Mm-hmm.
and the podcast network in general, this was this was an idea I never thought about how I was going to make money in this.
No, that's not the why we do
What
it.
I was thinking about, honestly, what I was thinking about is I was thinking of Malcolm Gladwell's, which is somewhat debunked now, uh, um, clocking 10,000 hours. I was like, I need to just do this. I need to keep doing it until I've done it, and for such a long time that it becomes something I have systems for. I have a plan for it.
Mm.
I know how to make it happen. I've got an execution plan.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just thinking about that. And I just said, I just have to be consistent at whatever it is I end up doing. And so everything I was interested in, I would just I would take stock and say, like, I can't let this go. How do I keep it going, but focus on this other thing I'm interested in as well? And so that's what I would do. And
And all of that
my first
takes.
podcast,
Go ahead.
it, my first podcast is what, 13 years old.
Wow. Wow.
I've lost count. 13 seasons. But I can kind of do that podcast in my sleep. I went from, having to heavily edit, those episodes, to figuring out how to steer a conversation so that I could do as little editing as possible on the back end.
Mm-hmm.
And that was practice and time. And then I thought about how it actually applies to many other parts of my life.
But you also have a natural talent for this, and not everybody does, which is great. I mean, and that's not telling anybody else they can or cannot do this. Um, I
Mm-hmm.
know that I do not have the same talents you have about setting up, running, and even interviewing people on a podcast. You and I were able to converse easily, but the podcast thing is one of your both skills and talents. Um, there are some people, I know some singers particularly, and some designers who there's only one thing in their mind day and night. They are not interested in any diversity of
Hmm.
talent or skill. And the problem is
Yeah.
they are, and you'll excuse the phrase, but they're bitching about what's not happening in their career all the time because they cannot say, oh, in between my singing engagements with large orchestras where I make a lot of money, I'm sitting around twiddling my thumbs, right? Now they're
Yeah.
making a living, but they work 6 times a year, right? So for them, it's like, I'm
Hmm.
doing nothing, I'm doing nothing. Well, do something else. Have some other
Yeah. Do
interests.
something else in
Do
that time.
something, even if it doesn't work out. Try something else. Tell your friends, hey, I'm interested in working with you. What are you working on? And you meet people, or you fall over some other talent or skill or interest you have, and you didn't know it. And you can always quit.
Yes.
That's easy enough. Um, Speaking of which, quitting is not something many of us are willing to do once you've invested so much time in the industry. Um, and some people just
Yeah.
need to. It's a very difficult decision, but perhaps that's for another discussion.
Well, when you were saying that, it kind of reminded me of the movie Center Stage.
I do not know it, but that's okay.
It was a really
No, I don't.
2000, uh, 2000. Um, it was. I think it was the first film that Zoe Saldana was in.
Mm-hmm.
But it starred Amanda Schul
I
as
still haven't seen
a
the movie.
girl who gets into um, the American Ballet Academy,
Mm-hmm.
and then it goes through the process. Well, it follows 12 teenagers who get in their various paths that they take. And there's one character who dance has been her whole life because it was her mother's dream.
Mm,
So
right,
her mother was pushing her to pursue this, but as she gets to this point in her life where things are about to change for the better, um, she finds love, and she starts to she starts to step out of the box that she's been in, and live a little bit,
right.
and realizes that there's kind of more to life uh, than just dance. And it was really really insightful, and it was kind of like I mean, it was definitely like one of those moments where it's like, wow, just because you're great at this doesn't mean it should be the only thing you do with your life.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah, and
there are other things you can make space for, or else you're going to look back on a life that you've sacrificed everything for this thing. And what happens, especially in the dance world, what happens if you get hurt and you can't dance anymore?
as many people do.
Or or
Yeah.
or there's a long rehabilitation process. You have to think about what to do next. If you can't continue at the pace that you were at when you were younger,
Mm-hmm.
that in general. Let's say if let's use that as the example. Like you were at this quickened pace early on, and then something happens, and then everything kind of slows down. It's like, are you just going to sit and say like everything I've done is for nothing now? I was like, no, like all of that stuff you did was great. So now take stock in it and figure out what else can you do with that as your foundation.
It's
What
still
else can you do?
depressing for a lot of people. I'm thinking right now of one particular actor who, at the age of 19, uh, auditioned for a show. a Broadway show, got it, and went on and did 5 Broadway shows in a row and 3 television movies. And then by the age of 26, couldn't get a job because he was a type in his early years. He looked like the kind of role that a producer and director would want to play certain kinds of roles. And then once
Hmm.
he got too old to be that, he wasn't another type waiting in the wings. And they stopped hiring him. He had not gone to college. He did not necessarily have other skills. Yes, and a lot of people do this. He could teach. He did have experience, but at 26, you really shouldn't be a teacher yet, right? Um,
Hmm.
that he went through a really bad period of transition. That happens to dancers all the time because if they get hurt or just if they decide they can't sustain that kind of physical abuse sometimes, it's really true for, I guess, anybody in any profession. uh, let's move this conversation around. What do people do? What should they do? um, is there any advice to offer them? You get, whether you go to school or not, but let's say you go to college and you study,
Hmm.
whether it's design or acting or directing or whatever you're doing, and you have figured out your path that you want to do, and you get out of school, and you live in either LA or New York because that's where you want your career to be. Um, what do you do next? The easy line is you audition. Well, that's easier said than done. If you're 24 years old and the only parts they're auditioning for are 36 to 80, there are no roles for you. What are you auditioning for? Well, maybe you're auditioning to play
Hmm.
summer stock in Indiana, which is still a job, but that's not going to pay the rent. You get a couple of months of work, or you work for Disney and you go to their Disney World. And meantime, though, are you learning anything? Are you increasing your knowledge? How do you do both? Any suggestions,
Yeah.
Darnell?
Well, I mean, in general, you have to take a step back and think about time management as well. Think about the time frames in which you would have the opportunity to work, the likely opportunity to work. Let's say um, you're in the regional circuit. Uh, you know, um, there's a fall production, a winter production, and a spring production.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so if you're saying like I definitely would love to work in the fall and the spring, then you can you can see that in your year, how do you measure a year?
Thank you for the
I did.
entertainment
Okay.
moment.
You can find
Well,
if
we'll,
you
we'll
know that you're
thank
going to
you, but
have
we'll call
gaps.
you.
Yeah. You know what? I'm fine. Okay. I got my IT career to fall
There
back
you
on. Thank
go.
you.
There you go.
uh, but if you know that there are going to be gaps in your year, you can start thinking of, okay, so if you're trying to prepare yourself for the fall, you any opportunities you can take advantage of in the fall, like what would you have to do? Like if you're an actor, maybe take an acting class, because just because you are a great actor now doesn't mean you can't be an even better actor
Well, and let's
um,
take it another
by
step,
taking
though.
classes.
Acting classes cost
Yeah.
money. Dance classes cost money.
Yes.
And I hear this
Okay.
all the time from
All
people.
right. Well,
They can't afford to take more than one
good point.
class.
So you think about a job that could really use your acting skills that may not be a job that places you on a stage,
Okay.
which, you know, I guess that's why a lot of actors ended up being, wait staff,
Right.
because that kind of customer service is a role you're playing. But it's not just waiting tables. A great actor could be a great customer service representative. A great stage manager could be a great manager pretty much anywhere, you know, because of a lot of those skills sort of transfer, you know. You just have to think about the other things you want to do, or the other things you like to do,
One
and
other way to go. Uh,
see how your skills can apply.
yeah, absolutely. But one other way to go, which doesn't always work, but I'm in the habit of asking people, who is the icon that would be a bucket list, checking off your bucket list. I want to work for or work around so and so, whether in whatever field. Write them a
Mm.
letter. Let them know. Do the research. Find out how to send it to them. My advice is no emails. That gets thrown away. But use the old snail mail. Keep it short. Let them know who you are, and let them know that they mean the world to you. And of course, the sneaky thing is there can be more than one person. But let's just say there's somebody that you think, if I hung around this person, I could learn from them. It's a mentor, but it's
Hmm.
somebody who could introduce you to people that might be able to use your talent or give you additional education, right? That's an important way to go. To me, you should not get past your junior year in school without writing to some of these people. I have a summer off, or it'll be another year and a half, but I will be out of school. Can I be your assistant? Is there a production job on a film you're working on or a show you're working on that I might be able to help out on as a volunteer? And you always have to say that, even if you need money. Unfortunately,
Mm.
because you have to compete against other people who are willing to work for free and have money. But you'll figure it out. And if you need to turn around and say, you know what, I want to volunteer, but the truth is I can only give you 2 weeks of my time. I have to make money. Maybe they'll find you some money, which happens a lot. Almost
Mm.
every job I've ever volunteered for, they paid me, something, but I didn't ask
Do you
for it.
think it's do you think it's easier do you think it's easier for someone um, to mm, to pay like a stipend for a temporary opportunity? You think it's easier for them to do that, and as opposed to saying like, I want to be your assistant, just flat out, I'll work X amount of hours a week with like an undetermined end date.
The
You
problem
know,
with
they're
yeah,
thinking
the problem with the
like they don't have
question,
they don't have that in mind.
the problem with the
Yeah.
question is only everybody's situation is different, and unless you know them already,
Yes.
you don't know what it is. So basically, you just have to say, "This is. I just want to be around you. I just want to work with you. I'm willing. Here are my skills that I bring with me. I'm organized. I'm, I want to be an actor. I want to be a designer. Um, I just need some to feel what it's like to see around there. But you don't want to kiss butt. It's not about kissing butt, but it is about making someone
So
feel like they have something to offer you, and let them
we've had this
offer it.
conversation too. We've had this conversation too. What if you are in a situation where you cannot? So I always think about, if do I love something enough that I could do it without getting paid to do it?
Mm-hmm.
That means I'm going to put my all into it no matter what, and then any kind of compensation is going to be icing. That's just what I keep inside.
Yeah,
You know,
but that's
I will move in this direction, but there are, you can't, just because you have the time doesn't necessarily mean you can afford to work for free.
well,
So
but that's a
what
decision
if
each
the
person has to
letter
make. Right,
true,
right.
but what if the personal letter to someone saying I'd love to be your assistant, um, comes with a caveat, but I would need to be paid. you know, uh,
It gets tossed in the garbage
because it's not
immediately.
as
It gets this is manipulation.
yes.
I'm talking about how to get that first door open. This is not about do this when you're 40 years
Hmm.
old, although it could work then too. But here's the trick: if you
Okay.
were willing to spend money on school and go into debt, then here's something where you're not going into debt, but you're not making money. Maybe you can only offer 2 weeks. You don't have to tell them that up
Mm.
front. First, let's see if they even respond. If your hero is Denzel Washington, and you say, and this is not about I want to be your assistant, because assistants may mean you need to do stenography, computer skills. You don't know what you have to offer them. You're just saying,
Mm.
I want to work in the industry. Can I assist in any way possible? Don't put the specifics. Let them come back to you and say, you know what? I'm working on such and such movie. It's going to be 6 months in the desert. Can you afford to do this? Then your answer is no. But you've got the answer from Denzel Washington. You made contact. But I can offer you a month. Give me a chance to get my finances in order. And if I could give you a month doing anything, could you make that work for you, Mr. Washington? It's a
But does that
negotiation.
contribute to? But does that contribute to the dwindling of a middle class artist?
Yeah, of course it does. But the trick is you're trying to move your way out of it. And everybody's going to have a different path. That's part of the reason why they can't have a course in college on this. No two people have succeeded in the arts the same way. Meryl
Hmm.
Streep and Kevin Kline are both brilliant actors. Their stories are completely different, and it has nothing to do with their gender. They are just different.
And totally different generation.
Yeah, I'm
So,
sorry
what
to
about today's
today's
generation?
generation. Rihanna, let's use Rihanna in music, who is going to be in
Very
a
rare.
movie musical. Of course, it's very rare.
Very rare.
Of course, it is. But that's the point. So you're looking for a middle
Hmm.
class way. There are people who have worked their entire life almost nonstop that I know. That's because they can sing, dance, act, um, and charm people all at the same time. Not everyone can do that. Learn.
Well, I also think it helps. It helps to think of um, what would you like to do if you had more um, knowledge about, if you had more education about this particular topic or subject, and um, in a situation where there's either no pay or low pay, you can think about how you still have control over the time, over your time.
Right.
Like you said,
Absolutely.
yeah, I only have 2 weeks, and I would love to help.
Or I can only do
You
part
have more
time.
control because
Or
if they,
or I only have part time. I can only work
yes,
evenings. But the step one is to get someone to respond. And unfortunately, once you put all the details in there, you're already forcing someone else's hand. So step one is
yeah.
just
So
I
you,
want to work with you or I want to learn from you. That's fine. It doesn't mean you may just get an answer saying, that's great, and I'll be glad to talk to you or Zoom with you, but really I have nothing. Hey, you got a Zoom out of it.
well, I would say before you send that letter,
Mm-hmm.
uh, that you think about what kind of commitment would you be willing to give if the opportunity presented itself. Because if
Absolutely.
you're just like, I'm wide open, because I hear a lot of artists who are just grateful for the opportunity, and it's like, I get it, but as soon as you put yourself in that position, it just opens you up to be taken advantage of.
Well, it depends. I'm to me the mentor thing is a learning opportunity, not a job. And that's where I agree
True.
with you that if you're working for someone, if you're going to go to a summer regional theater and they want you to be an electrician
Hmm.
for free, tell them to screw themselves. But if you're
Yeah.
working under a Tony Award winning lighting designer for a month and you have to do that for free, that's an education. And more importantly, you're going to be able to talk to this person and meet his or her associates. That's what you're going to ask for. I need to learn something from this procedure. That there are two different
Hmm.
situations. Unfortunately, I agree with you that too many people refuse to pay people for their work. That we cannot allow.
Yeah.
And more importantly,
And if
there are
they don't,
people who
and
offer
if
to
you
be
start out not getting
right.
paid,
No, well, it depends if it's still part of your education. You can also pay an acting teacher or a dance teacher to go to class. If you think of it, well, okay,
well, but that's your mindset.
mhm,
And that's what I was saying before you write that letter. You have to have in your mind what you want to get out of the
absolutely,
experience.
that you're right.
And knowing that you're not in it for you're not actually in it for money, you might be in it for this experience that will open doors.
Yeah.
Um yeah, so you have to think about that, because if you don't, you're just saying like I don't know. There was a time where I said, I just want to be in and around a stage. I want to just work anywhere in, is it called a theater? I work
Yeah.
there. It's like, because I wanted to understand all of these elements, and that's how I got into stage management.
Well, on the
Really. It was
reverse,
just,
I mean, I
you
know
know,
it's my
being behind the
circumstance.
scenes of
Yeah,
of
I know
everything.
it's my circumstances, but I spent 9.5 months walking into, for those who know who he is, producer Hal Prince's office, 28 Tony Award producer who's no longer with us, and saying, all I want to do coming out of school, I want to work for you. However, I'm willing to empty garbage cans for free. And I'd walk in and I'd make friends with the receptionist, and it would be 2 minutes in the office. And I'd leave my resume and I'd come back once a month, and I did it for 9.5 months. And when they called me, they didn't ask me to work for free. They say, we have a job. It's not what you were looking for, but it's working with us on a new Broadway show. And all of a sudden,
Hmm.
I had a paid job. It still comes down to what made them not throw my resume in the garbage. And that's part of the problem with our business, but it's also a technique. And if they had asked me to work for free, I probably couldn't have afforded to do it. So I lucked out. There's no question. Um, I would like to slightly move off this just to end in a very positive, enlightened, joyous moment. I would suggest to everyone,
You gonna
every
you gonna hum a few bars?
yep, well, close. I'd like to suggest to everyone they go on YouTube and they find the opening numbers to the Tony Awards for the years that Neil Patrick Harris,
Yep.
when he was the host, the final one that is the best of all of them is 2015. But I believe he also did 2013, 2012. It's in that vicinity. But just look up Tony Awards, Neil Patrick Harris, opening number, and look at those. It just makes you want to be in the theater and makes everything we do and all the torture of it worthwhile. There is such joy being part of this community. And that's what we're all fighting for. It's not competition. You getting a wonderful job, whether it's on Broadway or at the Guthrie Theater or Actors Theater of Louisville, does not make me any less. I'm thrilled for you,
Hmm.
right? So let's get everybody feeling like we're there to support each other. It's the reason why I suggest you write to people in the industry, because most of them are there to support each other. This is not competition.
Yeah.
I mean, getting the job, yeah, but nobody chooses you to be an electrician over someone else for the, because it's a competition. It's just things work out that way, right? So
I think the best opening number was 2013, Neil Patrick
which one was
Harris.
that?
Uh, that was when the opening number was called
Yeah,
Bigger.
that's it. But I think that's 2015. But you may be right. It's bigger. There's another one where he does a salute to straight people coming to the theater. It's called Broadway is
Not just for
not
gays
for gays
anymore.
anymore. It is hysterical. But the people on that stage, you just feel the joy. So, and look,
Hmm.
James Corden did some wonderful opening numbers also. But if you want to understand why you want to be in the theater versus television or film, watch the Neil Patrick Harris opening numbers.
Yeah,
So
I think that's Tony's did a really big push at that time to really talk about why we love it so
and this
much,
is the 75th
and
year.
in those opening numbers, it was
This
great.
hopefully will be a special year. It's the 75th anniversary of the Tonys. Very few people watch it. It is one of those specials that unfortunately gets ignored by most of the public. But again, it's a community event. It's really for us, for the people who love
Yeah,
theater, and that makes it all the more special. So hopefully
I
people will
think
watch.
I think that 2013, the 2013
Mhm.
Tonys was the one I watched from Times
Oh
Square.
wow. Okay.
There was a whole thing where you could sit in Times Square, and it was actually a pretty warm day, good weather, surprisingly good weather. Um, it was a really good time.
Well, and the Tony, just being part of the Tonys is a labor of love. If you, I refer back to my book, The Business of Broadway. There's a
Hmm.
whole section on
Hmm.
how expensive and torturous it is to be backstage working on the Tony Awards, and how it actually works against the benefit of Broadway shows. It's such a mixture of feelings because you just adore it. And at the same point, more shows will close due to having to spend money to be on the Tony Awards, then will benefit from it. So it's a business. Here we are, the business of theater, right? A working title, if we ever come up with another one. Um, so it's most of theaters that way. We work 24 hours, 7 days a week sometimes, and the audience comes in and goes, "What's the matter? You're charging $4 for a drink," and that's all they really think about. Or, "I didn't like the costumes. What are we going to do?" Right? We put our hearts and souls into this
like
stuff.
yes, and you're like, I'm not a fan of the costume.
Right?
I'm sorry, what are you a fan of?
Yeah.
And did you tell them?
Yeah. And Lord knows we were thinking only about you when we put this show together. Right?
Yeah, I mean, because if we couldn't, you know, yeah, you were all that mattered.
Right. All right,
I do
wrap
think
it
it
up,
is
Mr.
it is
Radford.
interesting.
Wrap it up.
All right, we'll wrap it up. Yeah, YouTube, Neil Patrick Harris, Tony's openings, they're all
They're
great.
all great.
They were all a lot of fun. Yeah, and that's the business. The Business of Theater, a working title. I'm Darnell
I'm Mitch
Radford,
Weiss.
and we'll see you at the theater. Thank you for listening. Tune in next time for another episode of The Business of Theater, a working title, with Darnell Radford and Mitch Weiss. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Share the podcast with a friend, colleague, or give us some social media love. This podcast is an Emory production. Visit us online at em3ry.com/TBOT. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at EM3RYOTM.